Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I wanted to welcome everyone to our first ever virtual Q&A hosted by Spotlight PA for small business owners in Pennsylvania. And in particular, we're focusing today a little bit on the Pittsburgh region, but not solely. I'm Christopher Baxter. I'm the editor-in-chief of Spotlight PA, which is an independent, nonpartisan newsroom covering the state government and urgent statewide issues. We are a unique news organization in that we provide our work to 30 newsrooms across the state at no cost, part of our mission to better inform and empower Pennsylvanians everywhere. In order to do that, we rely on donations from readers as well as support from the Lenfest Institute for Journalism, which is the nonprofit owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer, as well as foundations across the state. Those include the Heinz Endowments, the Henry L. Hillman Foundation, and the Pittsburgh Foundation. If you value this webinar today and want to help us continue to provide them, we're certainly interested in doing that. You can look us up at spotlightpa.org or get in touch if you're interested in providing other kinds of support. As always, Spotlight PA operates independently of all of its funders and event participants, and it takes no position on the issues discussed today. Funders and participants do not have input into the selection of which stories Spotlight PA pursues or the reporting process for those stories. Funders do not review any content before or after publication or have any kind of special access to reporters or our newsroom or its leadership. In short, we answer to you, the public. Finally, we want you to know we're recording today's webinar, so those who cannot attend or maybe RSVP'd but couldn't make it can watch at another time. We're also streaming it live on Facebook. I'm thrilled to welcome our 4 panelists here today to talk about the resources available to small businesses, and most importantly, to answer your questions and provide tips and strategies to endure this challenging time, which is unlike any other I think any of us have experienced. Of course, small businesses are really the lifeblood of our communities, and we're really proud and happy that we can play the role of convener here to bring you all together with these experts and hopefully have you take away some tips or information or know about some resources that you didn't know about before. I'm going to introduce each panelist, and they'll give a short overview of what services they provide and what specifically they're doing to help right now during the coronavirus. Then we're going to open it up to questions from the audience, and I hope that pretty much drives us forward for the hour. If you're new to Zoom webinars, you can ask a question by clicking the Q&A button. It's down on the toolbar. It says Q&A. You'll then be prompted to ask a question. You can type it in there, and we'll sort through those as they come in and get to as many as we possibly can. If your question is for a particular panelist, please say that when you ask it. We will also try to find whoever's asking the question in the system here and allow them to ask a follow-up live or interact a little bit. We'll kick things off with Robert Stein, who's the Executive Director of the Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence at the University of Pittsburgh. Robert, you want to tell us a little bit about what you do and what you've been dealing with the coronavirus?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me today and for hosting this webinar. So, as Chris said, my name is Bob Stein. I run the Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence at the University of Pittsburgh, and we are the part of Pitt that works with the small business community in the region. So we work in a 10-county footprint. I think the same footprint as Mark in the Allegheny Conference. And we provide education, consulting, and networking, mostly at no cost. And our mission is economic development. And in these past 5-6 weeks, we've seen tremendous pain from the small business community in the Pittsburgh region. Basically our economy was turned off like a faucet, and of course it's not designed to act like that. And so the business owners have gone through several phases of crisis through that time. The first week or 10 days was like, oh my God, what's happening next? What do I do? And then the second part of it was, these loan programs that were passed. Business owners were wondering, how do I apply for those programs? which program is best for their business, etc. And then kind of the third phase right now is some folks are wondering if they can still apply for loan programs given that these programs are mostly run out of money, and then how do we reopen? Now that we've been closed for some time, how will they reopen their business? So we've seen it all, but we're here to help these business owners.
Great, thanks so much, Robert. Really appreciate you being here. Next, I'll turn to Mark Anthony Thomas, who's the president of the Pittsburgh Regional Alliance. Mark, you want to give us a brief overview?
Sure. For those who aren't familiar with the Allegheny Conference, we serve as the region's civic business organization. I lead the PRA, which is a business attraction and expansion entity within the conference. On a day-to-day basis, pre-COVID-19, most of our work is helping businesses grow and thrive in the region. Obviously, that has shifted. And so what we've really looked at for the last few weeks is how do we provide meaningful information to the businesses, meaningful information to our members and the broader civic community, so people understand like real time what's being debated, what's being discussed, what tools and programs are available. And with that, we've hosted a series of webinars, we've hosted and developed a lot of informational type resources to connect people to what's available. We also have a significant role on the policy side, with the Chamber of Commerce being a part of the conference. And so that is actually driving a lot of our work to ensure that we're surveying and understanding what are the needs on the ground and then communicating that up to all the different stakeholders who we engage with. And so we want to make sure we're a voice for what reforms or new initiatives or tweaks need to be made to existing programs, but also serve as a convener of bringing people who actually can make decisions with those who are most in need together.
Great, thanks so much, Mark. Really appreciate you being here. Next up, we'll hear from Kevin Shivers, who's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers. I'm sure will be a very popular man on this call. Kevin?
Good morning, everyone. I'll do my best, Chris, and thank you for this opportunity. First off, I'm sure some of your Yinzer colleagues out in Pittsburgh will see that I am a Yankees fan. I'm a baseball fan, and I look at it this way. There are lots of good former Yankees who are playing for the Pirates today. And also, I'm a very big, I'm a Phillies fan as well. I love baseball. My background, prior to joining the Pennsylvania Association of Community Bankers, I spent 17 years working for a small business advocacy group. And so I had an opportunity to work directly with many of the types of entrepreneurs and small business owners that are joining this program today. And I can appreciate and empathize with you for the incredible struggles that you are facing right now. My background relating to community banking, I actually grew up in a community banking household, and I had an opportunity to see the extraordinary symbiotic relationship between America's small business and community banks. I think the real struggle for a lot of small businesses is that most of them, or many of them, don't really have a relationship with a bank, because for many of them, you start out with $15,000 and you don't get that in a loan. You borrow that from your family and friends. And so you're for many small businesses, that relationship with a community bank is limited. But what we have learned, and especially in my role here with this association, is that those small businesses that do have a business relationship with a bank, most of them do so with a community bank, where they actually know the leaders of those banking organizations and have relationships with the lenders because they're on volunteer boards together, etc. So looking forward to the conversation today. I'm hoping that I can contribute in a productive way and answer some of the questions. I've had an opportunity to take a look at a number of them so far, and hopefully can address those when the time comes. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kevin. Really appreciate you taking some time. Next up, we'll hear from Melisa Baez, who's the Director of Entrepreneur Training for Assets, Transforming Communities Through Businesses. Melisa, you want to tell us a little bit about what you guys have been up to? And we talked yesterday, you had some really fascinating things to tell me about, what you've been hearing from business owners.
Sure. Just a little quick background about Assets. So we are a nonprofit organization based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Our focus is on transforming our community through ethical and inclusive businesses. So we do that in a couple ways. We focus on working with entrepreneurs from the idea phase all the way through their growth and existing business phase. So we help with education, we help with micro-lending. We also have a partnership with B-Labs. So we help businesses measure and scale their impact socially, environmentally, and looking at their governance structure. So, it's been really tough over the past few weeks. As Kevin mentioned, there have been waves of trying to manage this crisis. And for us internally, what we first decided to do was let's look inside, let's look at our existing client base and figure out what their needs are. We work with very vulnerable communities. We work with individuals who are solopreneurs, individuals in the startup phase. So the risk for them and the impact of COVID has been either to shut down their business or permanently shut down their business. And that's been, these are entrepreneurs we've been working with for the past year and a half, developing their ideas. So it's been really difficult to see them they're still close to just getting there and getting started, and then seeing them having to pause. But we did a strong survey for over 400 clients just to collect information on what their actual needs are. The three biggest being technical assistance. There's so much information that's been delivered through the SBA as far as disaster relief funds, and knowing which ones are best suited for them has been very difficult to try and decipher from all the information, and also the fact that it's constant change. So additional to that has been capital. Trying to figure out operationally what should they take in right now to keep them at least open for about a month. And the other one is strategic planning. So if they are going to close temporarily, how do we work with them to think about their existing supply chain, and can they get creative and develop some new innovative revenue streams with what they currently have? So it's been really interesting. It's been kind of sad, but kind of exciting to see how they've been creative in this time. So there's been some hope in that, which has been really exciting. Following that, after we did our internal assessment, we collaborated with the other business resource providers in our community. So we reached out to SCORE, we reached out to the Chamber, we reached out to EDC, and we've actually had weekly meetings as a business resource community to figure out where the gaps are and which business resource providers can tackle the ones best with their capacity and their ability and expertise. And then over the past 2 weeks, we've really been filling in the gaps. So providing microloans to our internal clients, the most vulnerable, who are not capable of getting the PPP loan or the EIDL loan, and also providing technical assistance. So it's been up and down over the past few weeks. Internally, it's been a bit challenging for us also to try and figure out what is the best strategy and best approach for our own clients and the community at large. Thank you.
Wonderful, great, thank you, Melisa. So like I said, now we're gonna, we want this largely to be driven by questions from attendees. That's really the purpose here. So I'll just repeat again. If you have a question, you can click the Q&A button in the toolbar, and that will allow you to type one in and submit it, and we'll be able to see it on this end. We had a few questions submitted in advance, so I'll go ahead and start with those. And I'm gonna allow the participants to be able to talk when I bring up their questions. So I'm gonna start with Steven Evangelista, who sent in a question over the past day, and he had a question about his water treatment business. And Stephen, are you there?
Hello.
Hey, Stephen, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thank you guys.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so I actually recently started my water treatment business. I'm actually out of Lancaster as well, so I know assets pretty well. But anyways, I started my business in January when obviously things looked a little different. So I'm in a different, I want to say, unique position where I'm kind of taking the opportunity to maybe grow. But my question is, I left my current job at the end of February, or my past job, I should say, and went into this full time beginning in March before all this happened. So as far as unemployment compensations, what I've been reading is that new forms coming out hopefully soon. I'm curious to know my eligibility on that. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Anyone on the panel want to take that one?
Now, I'm not sure if he left his current job, his previous job. I'm not sure about his eligibility for unemployment. That would, there's a frequently asked question page about eligibility that on the PA's unemployment website. I would look at that and to see if you're eligible or not.
That's a really good observation, Robert. You know, in addition, the CARES Act included a piece for sole proprietors or business owners who are now unemployed, again through no fault of their own. Historically, business owners are not able to collect unemployment. The challenge, however, is that system is not even up and running yet. So, we keep being told that portal would be available for you to be able to apply. But as Robert had mentioned, I think one of the big questions for you, and you don't need to address this with us here, is, many small business owners, start out because they lost their job. They, for whatever reason, they were terminated, laid off, whatever. And you really need to determine what your eligibility is. I think the challenge is if you left a job, so in effect you voluntarily quit, and then took this position. Now, if you had voluntarily quit a position, you got hired by another company as an employee, you would be able to collect unemployment, and it would be out of the prior employer's account, because it was so recent. I think all of that gets thrown out the window now because you started your own business. And so I just don't know, I don't understand completely the law as that relates to those individuals who, left a position and then started their new business and now are forced into this circumstance.
Yeah, if he didn't have any revenue yet, like for example, some sole proprietors and independent contractors who don't have any employees, they were still eligible for a PPP loan because they can take their salary up to 100,000 divided by 12 and they can apply for it. And because of the changes with unemployment, they could also get unemployment this time around. But I'm not sure, since he did not have any revenue, he didn't pay himself yet, he didn't have any net, they calculate for the PPP, they calculate it as net profit. So I would try to maybe submit an inquiry to the unemployment office. So it's hard for us to make a call on your eligibility.
Great, thanks. We do have a story today. If you go to our website, spotlightpa.org, we published a story last night on sole proprietors, individual business owners with no employees, and some of the difficult choices that they're having to make and the confusion in navigating, what program might be best for them. And I think adding to that, and I see some questions in here that we'll get to, regarding unemployment and the expanded enhanced unemployment benefit, kind of making that decision a little less clear sometimes. The next question I had submitted in advance was from Timothy Rogers, and he says he received his PPP loan agreement, but he was a little uncomfortable with the terms specifically around forgiveness. And I've welcomed him to the conversation here if he's able to join. Timothy, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your business and your concern about the PPP agreement?
Timothy is on mute, so he may want to unmute himself.
Timothy, are you there?
I'm here.
Great.
I'm not used to the this type of conference very much.
No problem. No problem. We're all learning Zoom on the fly here. Real quick, do you want to tell us about your business and your concern about the PPP agreement?
Yeah, I actually run a driving school, which means we teach people in a car to drive. So you can't really socially distance in a car very much. So before we had to shut down, a lot of our teachers didn't want to teach. We want to bring everyone back. As a matter of fact, we were hiring more people before we had to shut down. So I applied for the PPP. Everyone's saying it's such a great thing. But my concern is I'm not sure I'll be able to bring everyone back. What happens if you put people on the payroll and they do not want to come back, especially since with unemployment, with the enhanced unemployment, they're going to be getting an additional $600 a week in their pay for, basically not for sitting at home as opposed to going, back to work. What provisions in the PPP, and I talked to my banker and they really didn't have a lot of information because they said everything keeps changing. What happens if you put people back on the payroll, but they don't really want to come back on the payroll? Do you have the ability for forgiveness? I know there is a provision in there that you can hire someone by June 30th to replace them. But what if you can't find anyone? Are you basically stuck then?
Timothy, your banks, the bank that you work with, I mean, this is a question that all banks are facing right now because there hasn't been guidance issued by the Treasury Department or the Small Business Administration regarding loan forgiveness and the documents that are needed and how do you calculate that and the terms that you're referencing. So I can appreciate your concern with taking that loan, and there was a lot of marketing of this program. I think there was some misrepresentation by a number of circles. This is free money. You're actually certifying that you're going to live up to the terms in this agreement, and it's not free money. If you follow the provisions, it's a grant. But if you don't, if on a 10,000 foot level, if you spend more than the 20% on non-payroll services, that's an issue. The big question for the banks right now is, what is the process that's going to be used to verify all of these facts and to be able to validate that these loans that were taken out are forgivable? And the other issue that you raised is one I know a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners are struggling with right now, because you actually have 3 different groups of employees that have been furloughed right now. You have those who are in that high risk category, and there's a real question: can you bring those individuals back? You certainly have a lot of employees who have fear about coming back, and that fear could be legitimate, right? And then you have a group, as you pointed out, who may say, that I'm getting enough in unemployment benefits more so than I did working. And so when you weigh those risks, there's really no reason for me to return to work right now. I think the point of this program, the CARES Act, and that additional unemployment was that it was going to stop at some point, and it was going to create that incentive to return to work. But as you pointed out, relating to the PPP loans and your ability as an entrepreneur to be forgiven, there's still an awful lot that is up in the air right now, unfortunately.
I also want, because I saw a couple of questions relating to the PPP, I think it's really important that you ask yourself as an entrepreneur why you are applying for these programs. I mean, they are available to you, and I just want to make sure that as you're considering these programs, that they make sense to you as a business owner, and you're not just applying just to have it. Because the reality is, if you decide to accept the terms and accept the loan, you have to manage it and report on it and be ready for an audit in the future from the SBA, and that's it's a serious audit. And you have to be prepared to manage and track every single dollar that you spend, and that you abide by those terms. So if you're in a position where you're looking at your company, you're thinking strategically, and you have an inclination that you might not be bringing back the same amount of staff, or that you might be pivoting as an organization, you want to think through and ask yourself, does the PPP really make sense for me as a business? So just keep that in mind.
Great, thanks. We have a submitted question here. It's an anonymous question, but I wonder maybe Mark or Melissa, you could field this. They're saying with the enhanced unemployment compensation benefit, how can you encourage your employees to come back to work when they might be making less than they'll be making on the unemployment? And I wonder what your counseling or guidance or things to consider would be on that.
I think that's a tough one. And I think the unemployment was designed to be generous, assuming that people who don't have other complementary benefits would really benefit from just having the pure cash. Where I think there's an opportunity as an employer is, you're touting the value of work, you're touting kind of the comprehensive set of things you get from working that's not just an hourly wage or a salary. And that should be the incentive that brings people back. As long as there is a generous unemployment buffer during this crisis, you probably will see some people who would take advantage of that if their wages just aren't at the threshold of what they're getting by being unemployed.
I would also add that you want to consider long-term over short-term gain. We don't know how long these unemployment checks are going to be coming in. And if you are putting yourself into a position where you're depending on that cash over the next few months, and you're not, part of the unemployment terms is also that you're supposed to be looking for work in the interim, and proving that you're looking for employment. So, to piggyback on Mark, you want to make sure that you're thinking long term, and whenever this kind of opens up again and the economy starts running, you want to be working and positioning yourself to get back into a job. So that's part of the counseling that we focus on too.
Great, thank you. There's a question here from Michael Pusker, and I'm going to allow him to chime in here if he'd like to. Michael, are you able to hear us? If you go ahead and click unmute.
Sure.
Great. Yep, real quick, do you want to tell us, you seem caught between the programs out there and you don't quite have a solution yet, and you were asking if there might be another resource you're not aware of?
Sure, I submitted 2 questions, but that's one of them, and that's an important one. Yeah, so the Yeah, as I've been struggling to figure out and disseminate all this information, and which is pretty chaotic, and you listen to all these different sources, and then you miss one little thing. So I read an article this morning, came out in the paper for yesterday, I think, that so I talked to my bank on April 3rd, on Friday, which was the first day that you were allegedly able to apply for the PPP as a small business owner. And my bank was a participant, which was good. I didn't have to go to somebody else, but they were not ready yet. I still have not heard from them. I actually checked in with them a couple of days ago, and my bank manager, branch manager, was supposed to get back to me. He has not yet. That was Wednesday. I just read an article this morning in the paper that as a small business owner with no employees, that I was not even allowed to submit an application for the PPP until last Monday. I think I may have my days wrong a little bit, but and then at that point there were only 4 days to be able to apply, but my bank still hadn't reached out to me to let me know that I could apply yet. And then the money was out as of yesterday, Thursday. So PPP is done at this point, and one of the gentlemen on the panel had mentioned that already a few minutes ago. In PA, the unemployment portal is not available yet, and I actually did file for unemployment maybe about a week or a week and a half ago, but I didn't know that you needed a special portal to do that. So that's not going to go anywhere. So at this point, my question is, what are my options? You know, there's allegedly all this stuff out there for small businesses, but when it really comes down to it, in my situation, small business, no employees, just me, what are my options? Because the PPP is out of money, unemployment portal's not set up yet. I haven't applied for disaster relief, and I guess that maybe is an option. So what are my options?
Hopefully for the PPP, Congress will refund that. I have full expectations that they will add more money into the program. The need is so great that I think also the economic disaster loans from the SBA are out of money. I think those will also be refunded. I think there's just too many businesses that were left in limbo, such as yourself, without that. For larger businesses, there's another program that was released last week called the Main Street Lending Program. Now, I didn't create the name of this, and the minimum loan for that program is $1 million. That's not so Main Street. But for larger businesses, there's a Plan B, but those aren't forgiveness programs. That's actual loan. But I'm hopeful that this PPP and the EDL are refunded shortly. Does anyone want to take on his unemployment question?
I want to add to the funding opportunity just to give clarity. So when the EIDL and PPP funds were dispersed across the US, certain banks only had a portion of funds to give out. So that's probably why they ran out so fast, because it's a first come, first serve. So they had to prioritize the applications as they were coming through. But, you know, to Robert's point, there's going to be a phase 2. It's going to come. I would just be patient with that. I would, look at your local community and see what is happening, what organizations are providing grants or small loans, any community banks. For example, and I kind of want everyone to know this, but the U.S. Chamber just released a statement, I think it was yesterday or the day before, that there's a small business initiative that's coming out. So the application for small grants of up to $5,000 or supplemental grants will be launched on Monday, April 20th, starting at 3 o'clock. And I can post information about that, but that's something to keep in mind, that there are these local initiatives that are coming out depending on where you live. So even in Lancaster, I think Steven mentioned that he's from Lancaster. there's a Lancaster City Emergency Fund that's in collaboration with the city, with CDFI, and other microloan programs that are all putting funding together and providing small microloans and grant opportunities for small businesses. You kind of have to do that research on your own, unfortunately, if some organizations aren't marketing that publicly or marketing too well. But they exist. There's a lot of grassroots initiatives that are going on. I would just recommend, and it's different for every city. But I would just do a little research and not necessarily depend just on the SBA disaster relief fund.
If I could also offer some observations to Michael, certainly reach back out to your community bank and talk about other options that are available. I don't know if you have a home mortgage or if you have, student loans that you're responsible or any other type of credit line. But banks right now are working really hard. I know community banks are working really hard to work with their borrowers, making deferments and extending terms and doing whatever they can to support their customers right now. The struggle that so many of these community banks faced was they couldn't get access to the SBA portal. There was, I had a community bank member of mine who only wound up getting access on Monday, yet they still were able to do 60 loans and loan out $40 million, which is extraordinary. The real challenge here, I think, was that, quite frankly, there wasn't enough available funds for community banks in that first amount of money, that $350 billion. And many small businesses don't have relationships with the large national banks, and that's not a knock, it's just how it is. And one of the things that my organization is advocating for is that with this next round of funding, and I agree with Robert, there will be another round of funding. Right now they're directing, I think the number is $250 billion. Personally, I think that number needs to be higher. But there is an expectation, or there's a hope, that there will be a set aside of at least 25% of that money to be directed to community banks to ensure fair access, even access for all types of businesses. Because in a lot of rural areas, you don't have access to a large national bank. It's only a local bank, a small community bank in your area, and you have business needs in those areas just the same as everybody else. Michael, I did want to share with you too, I saw you had a written question as well, and that related to not having your taxes done yet for 2019. And again, work with your bank, your local bank. There has been guidance since that first inquiry that you made to your bank. There now is some guidance allowing for banks to be able to use other types of information in lieu of your actual 2019 tax return. But that is an important conversation. And as Melissa and Robert had mentioned, there are other sources as well. But have that conversation with your bank first, and then see what else is out there through the other community groups and business organizations, as others have mentioned on this panel.
Just to give you an idea, Bloomberg released its statistics today of what percentage of businesses who applied for the PPP funding got funded. And it's all across the board, but for Pennsylvania, it's 40% of the businesses who applied. And actually, we fared much better than California and New York, who were in the 20%. So the demand is just too great. They're going to have to refund it.
Yep. Great, thanks. Mark, I wonder, in Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh region, I know I've seen various efforts of some of the foundations out there and other community organizations creating efforts to help the community. Are there specific resources, funds, information for that region that folks may not be aware of?
I mean, there it is, and I'll direct people to the Allegheny Conference site, because what we've done is looked at all the 10 counties that make up the Pittsburgh region. For those that have specific grant or loan programs, we'll list those. with the Urban Redevelopment Authority of Pittsburgh probably being the most aggressive in putting forth money. All of the local foundations have either stood up or are funding some type of program to support either artists or small businesses or minority-owned businesses. And so it's really like finding the targeted program that works for what your needs are, and borrowing or applying for the right amount of money that you feel you can be held accountable for.
Great, thank you. Interesting question that somebody submitted here from Christine. She writes, could my employees come back as volunteers without adversely affecting their unemployment? Does anyone have insight on that? It's an interesting question.
You know, I'm not an attorney, and I would definitely encourage you to seek a legal opinion on that. What I do know about our labor laws is I would think that would be a very difficult mountain for you to surpass, because, you know, basically you're asking your employees to work for nothing. And, you know, I think our Fair Labor Standard Acts and the other provisions of our labor laws would not allow for that. But again, I'm not an attorney, and I certainly don't want to offer legal advice in this realm. But definitely that would be something I think would be very difficult for a for-profit business.
Yeah, I would think about that deeply, just because it's depending on the type of work that you do. I mean, you're going to have to consider your insurance and what's covered. Similar. Good question for a lawyer.
There we go. I think we have you back. Sorry, we lost you there a second.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. Can you
Okay.
repeat what you were saying? You timed out there, Melissa, but it was really good.
I was just saying, I would be hesitant on that. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I would definitely defer to a lawyer. But you would want to consider, depending on the type of work that you're in. You know, as an employer, if you're an actual employee, you're covered through insurance with any kind of disaster or any liability that might happen. So if you're bringing someone in as a volunteer, you would want to consider the protection of that employee and all of those things. So that I just think it's a little tricky there.
Great, wonderful, thank you. Melissa, you and I talked yesterday, and I had mentioned that where I used to live, the cat sitter that I had reached out, and small business, I think she employs 6 or 7, and had created a GoFundMe account and was asking her customers and friends to contribute. And she had a overwhelming response within just a few days for a very small group. And I'm wondering, are you seeing other, sole proprietors or small businesses trying to just direct, grassroots fundraising effort, and are people having success with that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a great is and she was like just a freelancer marketer, and she developed a website that collected gift cards from local businesses and put it up on this like marketplace website. And there was no payment if you were a small business. There was no like fee to get onto the marketplace, but that was then spread through social media. And it was wild, because this was at least in the first 2 weeks that we went into quarantine, where some of these businesses were still, they had inventory and they were able to sell some of their products and whatnot. But that was just a really unique and interesting initiative that happened where all the small businesses collaborated. Another initiative right now that we have going on is we have the City Assets and a CDFI company, or a small banker in Lancaster City, that have put together a grant and loan fund for Lancaster City residents. And there is a collaboration among small business owners who work to put a GoFundMe page together as like a complementary or as like a supplemental grant to support this bigger fund. And that's all led by small businesses to work together, to get the community together and to initiate some buy-in to help support small businesses besides just themselves. So we've had some really interesting community-minded initiatives going on in Lancaster. It's been great.
Great, thanks. For the rest of the panel, what tips would you give folks? I mean, I think it can feel a little uncomfortable for business owners. You know, they provide a service or a product, and you know, they sell that to their customers, and they have a good relationship there. It may feel awkward for them to approach customers and say, "Hey, we're in a really tough spot. Would you mind donating, or you know, some other way to support us?" Do you have tips about how to approach that and what kind of language to use, and you know, should people feel more comfortable doing that than they may? I'm just wondering if any tips and tricks out there.
What I would encourage that I've seen, well, I live in the shady side neighborhood of Pittsburgh, and so a lot of our small businesses have definitely taken a hit. And so what has been sweet is when you actually walk by the businesses, they have cues on how to support their work online. A lot of the businesses that we would normally frequent have been pretty aggressive either on social media or email and offering specials and reminding people that they're still here. There have been some local efforts to encourage people to buy takeout on certain days and support local businesses and other ways through marketing initiatives. But I think that's what's needed to really keep the momentum going and then keep people, for business to keep themselves top of mind for people that are managing a lot of different issues right now.
Great. Okay, thanks. It looks like someone has used the raise your hand feature, which is something I wasn't going to try to explain, but I'll give them a shot. Terry Boyer, do you have a question for the panel?
Yeah, that might have been an inadvertent push. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. Just wanted to make sure we didn't skip over you.
Yeah, no, we're intently listening. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right. Let's see here what we have next. Melisa, when we talked yesterday, you had mentioned, you know, focusing not just on the immediate kind of rush of needing all of these, trying to figure out which resources to apply for and how to get it as quick as possible because people really feel like they're in a tough spot. But also sort of like the mental, emotional health of small business owners, and you know, taking a minute to kind of consider the situation they're in and how unprecedented it is. And I wonder if you can just real briefly talk to that, and again, any sort of tips or tricks or resources you have for that.
Sure. So as I mentioned in my intro, the first step that we took as an organization was, one, to do a quick check-in with our entrepreneurs, and it wasn't necessarily an ask around their business needs. It was just really, how are you doing? Are you taking care of yourself? How are you feeling physically and mentally, emotionally? And how are you handling personally, first and foremost, the situation with COVID? At the end of the day, I think, you know, what we try and talk to our entrepreneurs is, you have to take care of yourself before you try and take care of the community, before you try and take care of your workers. And we kind of phased it out in three. So first, it was a check-in on you. Second was a check-in on your workers. And then three was check-in on your business, especially in the immediate time. And we focused on those three questions. It was, how are you doing emotionally? How are you doing physically? How are you doing? And are you feeling grounded? And are you taking care of yourself? Actually, it was those four. And trying to build this personal connection, because a lot of what's happened right in this quarantine is you've been isolated. So what they've needed to hear and what they've needed to feel is someone connected to something or something normal. And by doing that and making, you know, any kind of touch point feel normal as it could be during this time, allowed them some grace. It allowed them some time to just pause and breathe and be vulnerable in the situation. And I think that went a long way. And we did this one by one by one. So this wasn't any kind of mass email that went to every single person. We spent 2 weeks going to every single client and doing a personal check-in. And that has been a huge success in our toolkit. And in that, and figure out like things to avoid, you know, don't ignore your own needs. Don't make yourself feel out to be like a martyr. Don't take action just to rush things. Be strategic. There's so much uncertainty right now. To move forward in a quick pace without the big picture might actually cause you more harm as a business owner. So just take time, pause, and take things day by day, which I think could be very difficult for an entrepreneur. But as we all know, even with SBA loans, on an hourly basis. So it's really hard to think long term. And a lot of our focus is about ourselves and our mental capacity before we move forward, jump into like completely different pivots.
Great. We have a question from earlier that I actually overlooked. Roberta Springer had a question. Again, it was about PPP and unemployment. She had a question about which way to go. Roberta, are you there? You're able to talk now if you unmuted?
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay, confused. I started this early on trying to apply for different things, starting with unemployment, which PA.gov said to do. And then it changed after I applied to say, don't, because you're self-employed, wait, which I'm waiting for still to file for the unemployment that hasn't been worked out yet. Meanwhile, then I went through PPP, and that was kind of somewhat of a nightmare, talking with, you know, my accountant and so on and back and forth. And the employee at our bank has been in touch with us, but she doesn't administer these funds. She's not the person in charge. She just says, get your stuff in and see what hopefully we can help. So I haven't heard, am I assuming that when the funds are not there, do each bank, individual banks, I'm in Lidditz, PA, does each bank get their own funds and has already been assigned the certain amount of money, and I'm just waiting to hear if I still get that? Or now that I've heard the out of funds, is that it for that? And just have to wait till they hopefully put more money into it. And then the unemployment thing, I'm just a little, like I said, I applied, never heard a thing back from Pennsylvania. And that was back in March that I did that. So I don't know. You can help me with that question. I don't
Sure.
want to
Happy to jump into that one. And so again, the unemployment system works through your state program. And and forgive me, there's a little bit of feedback there, but you need to apply through the Pennsylvania unemployment portal, and it just hasn't been set up yet. The other challenge is, you know, for many entrepreneurs that are out there and self-employed, you can collect the unemployment until you get your PPP loan, but then once you get that PPP loan, technically you're no longer unemployed. And so I think that is certainly a question for many business owners. It's created a lot of confusion. I thought I could collect unemployment and then do this, and now you're wound up in a circumstance where the portal isn't even open. The other point that was made related to the to the money, it wasn't doled out on a percentage basis. It was first come, first serve. And for many community banks, that was a real struggle because it took them forever to get access to the SBA portal. Now, every bank that I was aware of that wanted to participate was ultimately able to, but again, for some of these banks, that access only was unlocked on Monday, and that put their customers at a disadvantage because you need this money, and you're looking at your community bank and saying, "Hey, I need this money. Why can't you help me?" And that created some challenges. So what we're trying to do as the industry, the community banking industry, going forward is with this next round of funding, we would like Congress to set aside a certain percentage, and what we've said is 25% of the 250 billion dedicated to community banks to ensure if they're going to continue on this first come first served basis and they're not going to do an allotment, that at least that 25% earmark for community banks will ensure that in rural areas like yours, bank customers have the ability to get that, because in many rural areas there aren't large national banks that you can go to apply. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thanks so much, Kevin. We're actually up on the hour. We're out of time, and I want to let our panelists go because I know they're doing a lot of really important work, and we really appreciate them taking the time to share their expertise and insights with us. I think we got to most of the questions. If not, we'll try to follow up for any we have remaining. But once again, I just wanted to thank Mark, Melisa, Bob, and Kevin for taking the time and for really helping what I think is a very critical part of our community, like I said, to start this small businesses. So thanks to you all, thanks to the attendees. We'll make this video available later today or in the coming days for anyone who wants to rewatch or share with someone who wasn't able to make it. Otherwise, again, I just wanted to thank everyone and let you know that our reporting, Spotlight PA's reporting, can be found at spotlightpa.org. Once again, thanks to our primary supporter, the Lenfest Institute for Journalism in Philadelphia, the nonprofit owner of The Inquirer, and to our founding partners, which are the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and Penn Live and Patriot News. Thanks again, all. I really appreciate the participation.
Hey, Chris, one last comment.
Yeah, sure.
For any business owners who are on the call, the Pennsylvania has the Small Business Development Centers, which is a federal and state funded resource available at no cost that can help and provide assistance to your business, help navigate through these challenges. Just Google the PASBDC.
Wonderful, great. Thanks so much, Robert. All right, thanks again, all. Appreciate you joining.
Thank you.